As I made my way home from work, I never expected to be faced with a demand so outrageous that it would make my blood boil. An entitled mother insisted that I jump in front of a car for her insurance money, but I refused to give in. Here's how it all went down. As I made my way home from work, I enjoyed the hustle and bustle of the busy city street. The smell of fresh street food wafted through the air, and the sound of honking cars and chatter filled my ears. It had been a long day at the office, but I was in good spirits. I walked at a leisurely pace, taking in my surroundings. I noticed a woman walking towards me, her head held high and a scowl on her face. As she got closer, I could tell that something was off about her. She looked agitated and impatient, and I got the sense that she was looking for a fight. As we passed each other, she stopped me in my tracks. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I need a favor from you." I was taken aback by her audacity. I didn't know her, and she certainly didn't know me. Okay, I replied hesitantly. "You see that car over there?" she asked, pointing to a parked car on the side of the road. "I need you to jump in front of it." I was shocked. Why on earth would she want me to do something so dangerous? "What? No way," I protested. "It's for insurance," she explained, as if that made it okay. "I need the money, and this is the only way I can get it. You're young, you'll be fine. It's not like you'll get hurt or anything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman was asking me to risk my life for her own gain. I was furious, but I tried to keep my cool. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that," I said firmly. She scoffed. "You're being selfish," she spat. "I need that money. You're young and healthy, you can take a little hit." I couldn't believe her nerve. Who did she think she was? "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to do it. It's not safe and it's not right," I said, my voice shaking with anger. As the argument between me and the entitled mother continued, I refused to give in to her demands. I calmly explained why what she was asking me to do was dangerous and illegal. "You need to find another way," I said firmly. The entitled mother continued to press me, insisting that I was being selfish and that I didn't care about her plight. But I knew that what she was asking was outrageous and that I wasn't about to risk my life for her own financial gain. "I'm sorry, but I can't do it," I repeated. "You need to find another way." The entitled mother's eyes narrowed. "Fine," she growled. "If you're not going to help me, then I'll find someone else who will." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off. I watched her go, still in shock at what had just happened. I couldn't believe that someone would be so selfish and reckless. As I made my way home, I couldn't shake the feeling of anger and frustration that the entitled mother had caused me. But I also felt a sense of pride in myself for standing up to her and not giving in to her entitled demands. As I reflected on the encounter, I realized that it was a reminder of the importance of standing up for oneself and not letting others take advantage of us. It was a valuable lesson that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Though it was a brief encounter, I was still shaken up about it, and I hope that this person did not go around asking people to jump in front of cars for her. That's absurd. Wow, that entitled mother sounds like a nightmare. Good for her for standing up to her and not giving in to her ridiculous demands. What a crazy world we live in sometimes. I'm 18 this year, and fairly recently on my own from my parents. I have a sister about 10 years younger than me. She was an unplanned pregnancy and nearly didn't make it to term. I don't know many of the details of how rough my mother's second pregnancy was since I was never told much, but I do know that it was so hard on her body that my mother could no longer have kids after my sister was born. She was in and out of the hospital repeatedly that year. My mother almost didn't survive the birth either. It made her and my father latch onto my little sister because she could have potentially never been born. And ever since then, I felt like I was just the other kid in the house, except for when they needed me as a free babysitter. The level of favoritism my parents showed long-term has me believing they were genuinely sick in the head for not noticing exactly what it was doing to me. And now it's rebounding on them, which I'll explain here. Starting with my 11th birthday, my parents wanted me to let my sister blow out my candles because she was 2 years old and cried at the sight of a birthday cake that wasn't hers. I didn't want to do it, but my parents forced me into it. They relit the candles for me to do it again after her, but the moment felt completely ruined. The same thing happened the next year, and the year after that, and so on and so forth. They just kept forcing it until it became the norm. My sister had to have presents on my birthdays as well. I never got any on hers either. And when I asked why, they just told me that I'm a boy, and boys don't need to worry about it as much. I know I was a kid, but did they really think that was a smart thing to say? Not really. And my parents would always choose a place my sister would like to be at more than me on my own birthday. Eventually, it became more like my sister was getting 2 birthdays a year, and I got none. Beyond this, my parents made their entire lives revolve around my sister. If there's something I wanted to do, my sister had to want to do it too. Otherwise, it was vetoed unless I could do it alone. I learned to just lock myself in my room with my video games because they didn't seem to bother me there, unless my sister wanted to come running in to annoy me, hence why I put a lock on the door. My parents wanted me to remove it, but I freaked out because I was an angry teenager who was tired of being intruded on at any given time. My sister came running in more than once when I had no clothes on, and my parents were upset with me for being naked in my own room. When I pointed out how ludicrous that was, they withdrew their objection and just let me keep the lock. My sister developed quite the princess complex because of how she was being spoiled on a daily basis. She was very demanding, so I stayed away from her as much as I feasibly could. Whatever excuse I could use to not have to deal with her, even if I had to make stuff up just to have time to myself. My parents hired a teenage babysitter, and I got more personal time. The babysitter quit because my sister wouldn't listen to her, and my parents tried to keep from paying by saying she did a bad job. The girl got some other people involved, and my parents finally paid her what they owed her. Then they hired another girl to babysit on the regular, and this one stayed. But my parents still made it clear that I was to be watching my sister any day I had free, which I went out of my way to make busy at my part-time job if I could. My sister treated me as her personal butler and ordered me around. She even had a stupid nickname for me she wouldn't stop using. Just hearing that nickname makes my blood boil. And if I didn't give her everything she wanted, she'd cry and call our parents, and then I'd be in trouble for mistreating her. We had many massive arguments because of this. After I refused to yield anymore, my relationship with my parents devolved into barely any words spoken between us for some time. Yet during my high school graduation, they had the nerve to brag to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. They weren't wrong, but the reason they were thinking of was not the one that actually happened. I worked hard just biding my time for when I'd be free, but my parents acted like they'd done so much. Maybe they did before my sister was born, but afterwards it was all about her. They didn't even ask me about school until parent-teacher conferences came up. I graduated with a B and C average. After my graduation, my parents took me to some place where my sister would always have more fun than me, even though the trip was supposed to be for me. On my 18th birthday in July, things really boiled to the surface. Even though it was my 18th, it didn't feel like it was about me at all. I hoped to God that we were going to my favorite restaurant for once. But no, they had the party at the local knockoff Chuck E. Cheese, which is the only place like it nearby to us. So it was the de facto celebratory destination whenever anything big was achieved, including my high school graduation. I did say it was a place my sister would enjoy more than me. I was surrounded by kids half my age having parties, and I was so bored with nothing to do but eat mediocre pizza, play claw machines, and dated arcade games for tickets to cheaply made prizes that brought me no joy. Then, when it was time for cake, my parents came out with one that was pink with white flowers on it. Sure, it had my name on it, but it was very obviously not a boy's cake, and there were only 10 candles. My parents lit the candles and set it right in front of my sister to blow out. That's when it finally happened. I just had this mental moment of all the pent-up hate mentally flashing before me, and then I just started ugly crying. I, an 18-year-old boy, was crying in front of the whole family. Everyone was so shocked that time seemed to just freeze. I got up and all of the stuff I had been holding in for the past 8 years just spilled out like word vomit. The entire family got to be a witness to this event, and when it was finally over, I just walked outside to sit by the family car. Several relatives trailed out after me to say they were sorry, and that they didn't know about the pink cake because my parents kept it covered till it was served. I said it didn't matter that they didn't know. They all sat back and watched as my life was taken over by my sister for the past 8 years. I had no real birthdays or celebrations of my own. They were all about her. And then, on the biggest birthday of my life, they all expected me to just smile and nod like always while they handed my sister a cake that was entirely meant for her when it wasn't even her birthday. Some of them started apologizing, but they made the excuse that all this time they just thought I was okay with it because my parents said I was. I told them I was never okay with it, and my parents forced it on me every year until I just pretended to accept it. I spread my arms out and said to look where we were. Does it look like the place I wanted to celebrate my graduation and 18th birthday? No one even tried to stick up for me all this time. I'm just the other kid while my sister gets everything. I didn't even get to have any of my friends there because my parents stopped letting me invite them long ago after they tried to voice their opinions over my sister getting to blow out my candles. There are 365 days a year, and was it so bad to want one that was about me and not her? Instead, I'm treated like the greedy entitled person for wanting my own birthday. Then I just went back to ugly crying. My father came outside by that point to yell at me for making such a huge scene. Because my mother was crying too, my sister was upset because I ruined her moment, and now everybody in there who saw thinks they're bad parents. I ended up yelling at him that they are bad parents, and he should know exactly why. Well, after I said that, The rest of the family descended on him like a pack of wolves. Better late than never, I suppose, but I'd never seen anything like it before. My father was practically backed right up to the restaurant front door, and then most of the crowd flooded back inside with him to have it out with my mother, too. My grandparents stayed with me and apologized for having their eyes shut so tight for so long. I don't know what was said to my parents in the restaurant, but it was roughly a half hour before they came back out, and when they did, they looked incredibly defeated. My mother was still sniffling after crying so hard, and neither of my parents could look me in the eyes. They both awkwardly apologized for what they did, and then offered to redo the party elsewhere. But that wasn't really enough for the crowd. One of my uncles ahemed rather loudly, and my parents said they'd never make me let my sister blow out my candles again, or give her presents on my birthday, or make any part of it about her. There was another ahem, and my parents also apologized for getting a cake that was obviously not even meant for me, and that they just felt like I wasn't worried about cake anymore at my age. Oh boy, was that the wrong thing to say. I became furious all over again and yelled at them that my age was irrelevant. They'd literally given my birthday to my sister and had no good reason as to why, and they knew it. Then I said there was no point in redoing the party because it's too damn late. They clearly showed that I mean nothing to them. They ruined 8 years of my life till I became an adult. What future birthdays with them could I possibly look forward to? Well, my father started to get angry at me for saying that, but when the entire family yelled at him, he shut up. My grandfather told him I'm exactly right, and there is no possible way they can undo the damage done now. He said my parents were awful people, played favorites, and treated me like a black sheep ever since my sister was born. And what's more, they were all awful themselves because they just let it happen too. And I'm owed far more than an apology. I was owed my life back. My mother broke down again and tried to come closer to me while crying my name and apologizing, but I refused to let her anywhere near me, and half the family blocked her from getting close. I just said I couldn't take this anymore and started to walk away. One of my aunts chased me down and brought me back. I could hear multiple family members yelling and cussing at my parents over what happened. But I was so upset, I couldn't even feel happy for any bit of justice after all this time. Also, where was my sister when this was all going on? She was still in the restaurant all by herself eating cake and opening presents that were meant for me. And if anyone was wondering, yes, my parents served her some cake after I cried and walked out. You'd think doing that wouldn't be their primary focus in the moment, but they were called out on it later. My grandparents got me to calm down and sit in their old minivan while everyone else cleared out the party. My sister threw a huge tantrum after being caught opening my presents, one of which was a brand new smartphone that she threw against the wall and broke because she wasn't allowed to keep it. She literally just got a brand new phone on her own birthday a few months earlier. I ended up being so upset that I was ranting that I never wanted to celebrate my birthday again. And my grandparents let me stay the night over at their house. When I came home, I still didn't speak to my parents. My mother just kept crying because I wouldn't talk to her, and my father was as closed-mouthed as me. The following weekend, my grandparents convinced me to go with them out to dinner, and when we got there, I was surprised to find a whole new party waiting for me. My parents were there, and they kept up with having the "don't hate us" smiles on their faces almost the entire time. There was a big chocolate cake with 18 candles on it, and there was even a banner with my name. They called it my happy belated birthday graduation party because I didn't really get either this year. I did kind of have to pretend to be happy. One good party doesn't undo 8 years of favoritism, or even make a dent in it really. And where was my sister? She was sitting at the table with her arms folded and her lip curled because it wasn't all about her like it used to be. And rather than sing happy birthday for me, they just sang an altered version called Happy Day. Then, as soon as I blew out the candles, my sister screamed. I mean, an ear-bleedingly loud little girl scream. My parents had to rush her out and then bring her back in later looking more upset than ever. She quietly pouted in her seat for the rest of the party. I did still get a new smartphone as well, and my sister got hers taken away, among other things for what she did at the prior party. But the smartphone wasn't all. The whole family had chipped in and gotten me a car. It was just an old white Volvo, but I loved it the moment I laid eyes on it. My grandfather knows a thing or two about cars and fixed it up himself. I was so happy, but my sister clearly was not, because she let out another one of those screams. She started having a massive tantrum and demanding a car too. My mother had to take her into the bathroom and they didn't come back out for a while. My father just went back to looking defeated. My sister had effectively ruined their attempt at trying to look good in front of the whole family. Multiple family members also had strong words for my parents that my sister was acting that way because they raised her to be a princess spoiled brat. I obviously started driving the car around right away, but only days later my sister actually vandalized the car by taking a hammer and breaking two of the side windows and cracking the windshield to the point where the car was undrivable. My parents managed to stop her before she did any more damage, but she screamed when they grabbed the hammer and tried to bite them. Everyone was furious with my sister, especially my grandparents, because my grandfather had put so much work into that car. My sister was spoiled so badly that she couldn't mentally comprehend that I could have something she couldn't. Several family members laid into my parents about how they were setting my sister up for failure by making her an entitled brat that expects everything to be given to her. Her actions didn't go unpunished. She was grounded for the rest of the summer and, effective the new school year, was sent to boarding school. My father had to be adamant that it was the only way to start undoing the damage they'd done. They fully acknowledge they are at fault. No one sided with them at all. My sister is miserable at that school. She hates the clothes, she hates the rules, and she's been lying almost constantly. But with cameras almost everywhere now, she's not getting away with any of it. Our parents tried to visit her a few times, but she just screamed at them for putting her in that place. From what I hear, this may be her school life until she's 18 years old. My parents did pay to fix my car. They had an auto glass company replace the windows and windshield, and it looks just as it did before. In August, my grandfather came to me and said if I was interested, he found me a job working for a friend, but it was 40 miles away, so I would need to move out of my parents' house unless I wanted that commute. I was all for moving. Finding a first apartment wasn't so easy though. I had to get approved for a credit card just to get accepted for a studio, but I got it. And I have been living where I am now since September. My parents keep trying to contact me, but I rarely speak to them. Anytime we do speak, I just feel awkward and uncomfortable. My grandfather has suggested that they simply don't want to acknowledge how badly they failed as parents, and trying to get me to forgive them will make them feel better about themselves, or something like that. But I'm not going to forgive. Not anytime soon. I'm finally happy and away from them. Now they've got nothing. They don't have me, and they don't have my sister. And my parents had to take more hours at work because boarding school for my sister is not cheap. Nor can I imagine was the party they had to throw for me, or the repairs to my car. Empty house, angry relatives, and the only thing they have left is their work. Feels like incredible misery to me. And I don't take delight in it, but it is the result of their own actions after all. It's heartbreaking to see how one child was favored so much over the other, to the point where the other child's own birthdays were ruined. And then to see how it all came to a head on the 18th birthday, with the pink cake and the sister getting all the attention. It's great that the family finally realized how wrong they were and tried to make it up to her. But you can't undo years of favoritism with one party. And the sister's behavior just shows how badly she was spoiled and how she wasn't taught to consider other people's feelings. It's a sad situation all around, but it's good that she was able to move out and start a new life away from all of that. A little backstory to explain how this started off. I have a cousin, Amy, who has been very unpleasant over the years. She steals, she makes threats, and she gets away with it. Last year she stole pound 150 from my grandmother. Then, according to my aunt, she cut up the dog's fur as revenge for my aunt posting about her bad behavior on social media. My grandma claims she asked Amy for help cutting their fur. Amy has been especially unpleasant towards me and has stolen from me for many years as well. She isn't trusted within the family and is rarely invited to family events as a result. On to last night. It was my grandparents' emerald anniversary, so we went out as a family. Then, extra family members who weren't invited, including Amy, showed up. Amy sits at the opposite end of the joined tables, far from my aunt, and begins a conversation with my mother. My grandmother was overjoyed to see her. And then it happened. My aunt got up and started to leave. Stupidly, I asked her to stay and not be silly, but she was adamant. Amy went to say something, but my aunt raised her voice sharply. "You do not talk to me." Amy left at that point. My aunt then paced a bit before going to leave. My parents asked her to stay, but she didn't want to. I told them to just let her leave, but she did reluctantly choose to stay. Meanwhile, my other cousin, Asta, wondered if she was the issue. Asta changed her name due to past trauma. My aunt refused to call her by her new name. After Asta also left, we had a conversation of which I called Asta by her name. With complete venom in her mouth, my aunt spat out, "You do not call Tabitha Asta. Asta is my dog's name, and it is insulting to me that you would call Tabitha that." Completely uncalled for, as by that point I hadn't actually done anything except say she should be allowed to leave. Asta's choice didn't involve the dog. The fun didn't end there, sadly. My aunt continued to make passive-aggressive remarks to Neil, my youngest cousin, for having invited Amy in the first place. Neil was in floods of tears. Neil had no idea my aunt would flip out the way she did. Their dad came in. I've spoken about my entitled uncle before, and he can be violent. Well, I didn't catch much of what was said due to all the shouting from everyone at the table, but the gist of it is, he told her to behave, and she refused to accept any fault. She kept talking and bad-mouthing my uncle and Amy, and going on, knowing full well she was egging him on. Everyone at the table asked and pleaded with her to stop, but she refused. Continued to claim she alone was the victim of Amy's behavior. I even put on my authority voice and told them, "Stop it, both of you, you're behaving like 3-year-olds. Though a 3-year-old would have behaved better than that, and my aunt ignored me anyway. My uncle threatened to throw a glass at her before he finally left. By this point, Neil couldn't stop sobbing, so I got up and hugged him, and being drunk, I loudly said, "It's okay, Neil, some adults can't act their age." At which point my aunt said, "No, they cannot," thinking I was only referring to my uncle. I followed Neil outside and sat for a while. I told my uncle outright he shouldn't have behaved like that in front of family and in the restaurant. I told him to get his anger sorted, but I did agree my aunt was out of line. I only went back in after she had calmed down. Thankfully, the rest of the night was uneventful, although it had been quite ruined and everyone just wanted to leave. This morning, we get this message on the family WhatsApp from my aunt. Just to make it clear to all of you, I was not drunk last night. I was drinking alcohol-free wine because I was driving. Also, I did not shout. I raised my voice. There is a difference. Nothing I said was untrue. I did not like being put in that situation, and all of you saw I was going to go home. It would have been better if low-life scummy drug users were not invited to family events. This way, we could all have a good time without the drama. She then continued to say that her best friend agreed she didn't shout, even though her best friend also tried to step in and stop my aunt. My aunt claims my uncle invited her to fight outside, which no one heard him say, but he can get violent, so I can't say if that's true or not. My aunt has been asked several times this morning to stop talking about it, but she continues. Other uncle says nastiness on both sides. I said, where and in what way have I been nasty? He could not answer. Funny how no one can answer, because I have never been nasty. My behavior is a reaction to others' bad behavior. Think on that one. I hate Amy. But it wasn't Amy who made the scene. It wasn't Amy who stormed out. It wasn't Amy who raised her voice in the restaurant, and it wasn't Amy who egged on my violent uncle. Amy left the second things got tense. Thing is, no one can tell my aunt that she was in the wrong, because my aunt will then go on a year-long tirade of hate and anger towards them. She once fell out with my dad for 5 years because he didn't want her feeding her dog at the dinner table one Christmas. Well, I feel like I just watched an episode of some crazy family drama reality show. But seriously, that's rough. Family gatherings can be stressful enough without all that drama.